Hello, all my lions and tigers out there. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. That's the famous line from The Wizard of Oz. At least it is until the Mandela effect takes that away as well. And for those of you out there that are, lions and tigers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I don't want to cause any division by what I'm saying. What I want to say is that what the reference to bears is what I'm saying is the average populace, or the most common populace that we all interface with and react with and live with in our lives. And I would say for those of us that are ascending, chosen star seeds, earth angels out there, we have a different way of being. And it's something that for some reason we all can actually identify within ourselves. Like, I can literally go to any of my brothers and sisters who I feel very drawn to all around the world, and we will make sense to each other. Not the same language, not even the same city, the same country, but our level of understanding of what is truth to us, being the tigers and the lions, we genuinely just seem to speak the same language. And then there's a whole bigger grouping of bears that, we just aren't the average bears. So we don't fit in. And what's ironic is today I was watching one of my brothers make a video where he was talking about an aspect. He was talking about Trump and Elon Musk and just simple aspects of what AI will create, etc. And he's saying these things so matter of fact, and I'm nodding along as I listen to his video. And then he says something where he says the masses around him don't seem to see what he sees. And it kind of dawned on me. I was like, you know what? It's so true. It's like just this simple concept of like common sense. Common sense is something that, eludes a lot. There's this really famous meme I put up where, Master Yoda says, it's not that you're dumb, it's just that you've always outrun you've always outrun common sense. You know what I mean? It's like you're just faster than common sense. It doesn't mean that you're not as bright. It's just that something like common sense seems so normal to those that are the tigers or the lions. And for those bears out there, it's just like something that just doesn't seem to process, and to us seems so foreign. So there is a divide, and I truly can't stand that there is a divide, because I know in any type of warfare, let's say, divide and conquer. So I don't like that there's a division being struck. However, it is very apparent. And it's not even just common sense. It's like, it's even to the point where simple truths like, love thy neighbor, all the things that I think Yeshua would talk about, like how someone could see, one way of looking at it, let's say a genocide, and then manufacture these those catchphrases or those catch concepts that kind of take away the actual definition of what something like that would mean. Someone who looks at it for just its nuts and bolts would realize that, a suffering of a huge populace, and deaths mounting. And people might think I'm talking about the conventional, but we could even look at, let's say, Sudan. And even though that grouping of persons aren't really talked about, it's still the same thing. It's just that maybe if it's not talked about by the bears or the common folk, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. And what I'm saying is that across the world, we see that if there's some type of sensationalized structure to propagating hate, it's like it's definable, it's justifiable. And it's like, oh, just because, media doesn't bring it to our attention means that it's not happening. It becomes that proverbial tree in the forest thing again. Like, if a tree falls and no one's there to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. And to most of us, the answer would be what? To the bears, it would be like, no, it doesn't make a sound. And maybe to the lions and the tigers, they would say, yes, it does make a sound. It does have a ripple effect. It does, put waves in the ether. And, you know, as the poetics of what Shakespeare would say, a rose by any other name is just as sweet. So it's like, why is it that there is this strike, there is this line, there is this division? And I can say to you, as someone who has lived most of their life acclimating, and if you're wondering what that sound is, it's just my dog. We, as the lions and the tigers, spent most of our life putting on a bear costume just to fit in. Most of us had to wear these bear costumes just to fit in. I know I did. I mean, for most of my life, I was, very intuitively profound. I literally, at the age of 7, was already believing and telling myself that this world I was living in was a hologram. And it was something so simplistic. I had parents that used to smoke packs of cigarettes in, in a vehicle. So I would get like a crack of a window open and I would look out the window and I would see these green walls just on the highway, just miles and miles long. And all I thought to myself was, how do I know that there's persons living in those homes right now? And how do I know that they're real? How do I know that this isn't a simulation? How do I know? How do I know? So I know that even from a young age, I was already thinking about things that most 7-year-olds weren't thinking about. And it was really hard, especially having the teachers and the parents and the friends and the social dynamics I had and the family I had, to even voice those opinions out. So much so that I spent a lot of my time, and maybe you had too, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for us. And it wasn't until certain time frames or certain craziness kicked up in the world that we're like, well, the whole world thought we were crazy, but really what we're seeing in the rest of the world is even crazier than the antics going on in our heads. And, for a lot of my time coming on this channel again, and for a lot of my time within the sweep up of all of the persons that we all had to negate out of this system of ours, I realized that most of us had to put on this bear suit just to live, just to fit in. I mean, I was a good student. I went to elementary, high school, college, university, did all that bit. I did well in my professions. I was either a manager or I was either someone that, did well. I never got fired from a job in my life. And so, from what persons would quantify or qualify, I didn't seem to have any squabbles, or I got along with people. People used to call me the life of the party. You know what I mean? And what's interesting is that when we all broke out of the bear costume we were all putting on, and we exposed to the world that we were these lions and tigers instead, there was a freedom that came with that. It was like the first time that I could actually just tell people or just express to everyone. It was kind of like coming out of that proverbial closet in a way, to say like, hey, this whole time, I had friends of mine when I started my channeling business that literally were like, how long have you been harboring this? You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, I was seeing entities from the ripe age of like 14. I saw passed on loved ones for most of my high school career. And most of the time when I would go to school, if I did ever go to school, and here's the funny thing, is that, like, by all intents and purposes, like, I barely went to class, and I would just go smoke joints, and I would just, like, live like a what they would call a skipper. I was in a very popular group, supposedly. But the majority of the time, like, people didn't understand how I was still passing the classes. And it was really because, I found school not to be that interesting or intriguing to me. Most of the books that were being read in English, I had already read when I was really young. And the thing was that even though I was skipping and I was doing all kinds of other things, I had this whole other spiritual world going on that no one knew about. So for a lot of us out there, we were really, really good at being the bear. Like I had everyone fooled, and I'm talking about people that knew me as young as 5 years old. And they were like, what? This whole time? This whole time. You know? I honestly felt like I was living a facade. And I think for most of us that are these tigers and lions, we either just showed our stripes right away or our mane, and people didn't like us from the get-go. And I would say that even if that was the case, you guys built up such a thick skin because you were being, tormented from a way younger age. And please don't kick slack to those of us that did put on the bear costume, because we were kicking slack ourselves at ourselves, because it was, at least for myself, it was a very hard life to live in, because I was always on the differential side of things, where it was like I had so much to say, and I didn't say it because of how much I knew that it wasn't going to be digested. You know what I mean? It wasn't that I wasn't a smart person. It wasn't that I wasn't a learned or read person, maybe more so than the average. And I tried to minimize that as well. It was weird because in the world I lived in, you didn't want to be the brainer. You didn't want to be the nerd. You didn't want to be all those things. So in order to even acclimate wearing the bear suit, you kind of had to dumb yourself down or not showcase who you truly were in even the smaller aspects, let alone saying, oh yeah, I see dead people. But what I will say to most of us is that the one intrinsic thing that we have as these lions and tigers is that we seem to have really tough lives, and it was by design. Because if we had to learn how to transmute, it would only be through real sheer depths of pain. And to learn how to turn that pain into like goodness, or to still not harbor horrifying feelings towards persons, and to accept and to love regardless of how much you've been bitch smacked in your life, that's a talent, that's a skill. Because I can honestly say in my lifetime that I had a semi-narcissistic parent who belittled almost everything I was. And then I also had friends that were they were low-brow individuals. They really would speak to really low mongreled views on the world, let's say, because it doesn't matter how educated you are, you can still be small-minded. Like I really had a hard time as a lion or a tiger when I would be around, let's say, men that were chauvinistic, or when I was around women that were users, or when I was around people that were racist, or when I was around people that were what's the word, caste driven, or they were minimizing those that did not have as much as them, and vice versa, and so forth and so forth. I had a really hard time, because for those of us that are these lions and tigers, some of us don't see those things. I had to explain this to somebody recently, because it's like as if we never had those blinders on in the first place. I came with the type of programming where I was like, I love everybody. I don't care what color you are, what creed you are. I don't care. And I mean it authentically and genuinely. I don't mean it because it's woke. You know what I mean? I actually do believe that. And persons in my life, and I had said about this, about the Earth Angel breed, we tend to love people. Like, people could never understand why I would be talking to homeless people like they were normal, or why I didn't see the separation. But these things are what made us different. Like I could look at a human and see a human for the value of the fact that they were human. Me, I always rated people based on their merits and how they treated others and how they treated me. I never spent time actually thinking about what they were wearing or what they, claimed to be, because I always had love for everyone, regardless of how justified they thought they were. So I must say this, because some of us have to break out and not wear that suit anymore. And then when we do, we're persecuted for it. And it's weird to see this. It's like as if like all the bears are like, why aren't you bearing like we are? That's a bad word to put it. Why aren't you acclimating in the bear populace like you once did? And the funny thing is like this level of acceptance is seen all across when we have those flashy keywords like woke. You know, like I could literally say that I'm a different sex, that I think I'm a cat if I wanted to, and there's human rights that would kind of protect me. You know, I could literally minimize minorities, and there's laws that would protect that too. There's so many different woke euphemisms that get thrown around all the time, and for some reason that's acceptable. But if you tell somebody like, hey, like I'm a spiritualist who believes in God, and I believe in Yeshua, and I believe in aliens, and I believe in all the possibilities of all that could be in an infinite, you know, infinite universe, because this idea that humans are just the only, that mathematically that would make no sense. Like you're telling me in infinity we're the only beings to ever exist here, even though our ancient history says ultimately and definitively that we are not. So I'm saying it's like it's easier for the bears to acclimate to something like, you know, even changes to our identity. And I'm not like talking smack about those persons, but it's like, let's look at this for a second. It's like you can accept an identity change, but you can't accept like a self-proclamation change. It's like if I were to tell you I'm still the same person, you know how many persons I had to like reconvince in my life that I was still the same person? It was like I was no longer a law clerk, but then I had to spend my time explaining I'm still the same Ashley that helped you move your furniture. I'm still the same Ashley that watched your children 2 years ago. You know, it's like as if the minute you put on this or you come out of the bear suit and you start saying, hey, I'm actually like a lion, or I'm actually a tiger. You know, they're like, oh my God, she's a tiger. We got to be worried about her. Or she's a lion. We got to be worried about that species. It was so much more comfortable for people to feel that you're just, you know, one of the average bears. And when do we move out of that feeling that we're not here to be making others comfortable? Like how many of us had to live uncomfortably in these other suits for so long? And it was to the point of exhaustion, at least for me. I never found happiness in my bear suit. If anything, I found that I rolled into vices a lot easier. I found that I rolled into more profane and toxic relationships. I found that me being in a bear suit and lying to myself all the time was one of the most unhealthiest states of being to be in. And yet, when persons call me crazy or call you crazy, it seems okay for them. That justification comes back out because it's those like catchphrases or words when you know, come out of the proverbial box. And it's just very hard for me to swallow because it's like, I'm still a human being. I still get up. I still put my pants on one leg at a time. I still pay bills. I still, you know, take care of my son. I still, you know, put gas in the car. I still do all of the things that most every other bear does, you know, so to speak, except I'm wearing a different exterior. And it's like, and I do understand because even as human beings, we still struggle with the concept of sex and we still struggle with the concept of race. And I, as someone else, you know, most of us tigers and lions find is that we don't seem to have an issue with race. Like maybe I was afforded a easier time being brought up in Toronto. Like you can like literally like can't spit without hitting another another race. Like we're so multicultural. We might be one of the most multicultural cities in the world outside of maybe New York. But I think even when they did there was like a population test done in different major cities. Like could you find every person from every country of the world? And you could find that here in Toronto. So that's what I mean. Maybe I was just afforded more of a like a robust, you know, upbringing Because like if I looked around at my neighbors, you know, there's like one white person, one Asian person, one black person, one Indian person. Like we were all like meshed together, and there wasn't this feeling of like, oh, one's better than the other. Not to say that racism doesn't exist, it truly does. It's something that I think I never adopted or never understood the concept of adopting. I don't know why. And I think a lot of us lions and tigers, we just are made that way. We just come into here and we're like, I love you because you're a human being. You know, it's kind of the same way I felt with, you know, anyone that was in a lower caste system, or what people would qualify as like, you know, poor or homeless or middle class or mid to upper class, or, you know, riche. Like it didn't matter where you stood in my eyes. Like I said, it was all based on merit. You could be a poor person and still be a dick. And you can be a rich person and still be a dick. And that's the merit I'll give you because you're a dick, you know? But I also felt like, you know, when it came to education, when it came to smarts, when it came to like, oh, I have a PhD, or I have this certificate to back my understanding. You know, there was great doctors. Like I said, I worked for a medical equipment company, and it was for red light therapy, and it was a little, you know, out there, especially at that time. Now red light therapy is more digestible, and there's been a lot more case studies that have proven that red light therapy is very helpful to introduce oxygen, or the CA oxidase connection. I'm not even going to go into all that, but it is understood, especially when it comes to athletics, like to rejuvenate the cells, red light does wonders. But I'm saying at the time that I was working in that field, it was very taboo, you know? And that's the thing, until, you know, someone decides to break out of the box and say, hey, I'm going to go a different direction with medicine. That person's pretty crapped upon until, you know, they can prove to the medical society that with numerous and rigorous, and may I mention, many, many millions of dollars. Because you have to understand that a new style of medical approach, if it does not benefit the pharmaceutical companies, like here was a light source that was going to get you off of drugs, right? You're not going to get a lot of you're not going to get a lot of funding, put it that way. But if you were some type of therapy that was going to introduce more drugs, oh, trust me, you could go to the pharmaceutical companies easily. But that's what I'm trying to say. It's like whenever something seems taboo or out there, or or non-explored, it always seems so foreign to people until it's become mainstream, right? Or until somebody has the cojones or the balls to really take it all the way. And that was the thing I found when I worked in that company, was like how many doctors would frown upon that type of even if you showed them all the case studies, even if you showed them, you know, the peer review work, they were still like, oh no, I'm a Western doctor, I stay in this box, you know what I mean? And the thing was that there was doctors that were really truly there to heal, I found, and then there was doctors that were just there to collect a paycheck. There was just doctors that loved to always say that they had to be regarded as a doctor. And then there was those that were like, hey, call me Bill. You know, there was always a difference. And I'm saying that you can find these differences in all these walks of life. But it doesn't mean that those that decided to break out of that mold, even in the medical field, were not lions and tigers as well. It just took them, like, the courage to break out of it. And any type of acclimation or any type of formulation of a box is hard. A lot of us that are on these different spiritual paths find that we're kind of way showers in a sense. Some of us are doing things that have never been done. Like for myself, I notice even in the spiritual community, I've got people that are Bible thumpers that come at me like nobody's business. But then I also have these light workers that come at me like nobody's business, because I talk about the shadow and Jungian work and looking at the parts of ourselves that make us uncomfortable and what people would call the dark side of our ego. And I'm kind of frowned upon even in my own community because I seem the eccentric, you know, because I'm not like, oh yes, everything's love and light. Yes, it is love and light, but how do you encompass something so grand as love without understanding hate? I am a Libra, and I'm not someone who's like an astrological so-and-so, but what I will say is that I do like to understand the extremes and everything in the middle, you know, because how can you thoroughly understand something? Like, how can you, admire a tree if you don't admire the leaves or the limbs or, everything, the bark. You have to envelop yourself in all aspects of what it is. And for me, love is the ultimate emotion. It is the most powerful emotion. And it's, I would say, even on a conscious level, when it comes to the astronomical sense of, conscious levels that we can rise into. And again, you don't have to agree with me, but I would say that we, as energetic beings, first and foremost, these are material, like for, paper mache that goes over. But I mean, even if you think of us as atoms being kind of conglomerated into like a material foundation, but even then, that's a perception thing. Like I said, we don't know what's truly true. Our brain is telling us what we perceive. But what I'm trying to say is that as energetic beings, we are made of energy, photons. Or sorry, photons are what hit the eye that make us seemingly like the atoms to be conglomerated together to make up a body. And I'm not a scientist, but like, let's just be practical here to try to make this argument or this discussion work. What I can say is that when you rise in consciousness, and if we could understand that we are, let's say, in sheerness, not just light, but we are somewhat of a resonance or a frequency. We all have our individual frequency. And let's say we all have our own, channel of the radio station that we resonate at. As we rise in that resonance, we go to different levels of consciousness. And even consciousness itself is one big woven, in my eyes, all. Right. And when I express to people, in a galactic sense, that this isn't it, and there is a galactic sense out there, those that are in the spiritual community, they throw these keywords and these hype themes out there as well. But it's like, how long have you spent with these beings? You're generalizing even what they are, because sometimes I sit there and people are like, oh, I'm Andromedan, and I'm like, okay. Or I'm I'm Pleiadian, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, do you know how big the Pleiades is? I'm like, there's multitude of different beings within that sector. We're in the Milky Way. Do you know how many different beings exist in the Milky Way? And it's like, we just like combine the thoughts that the mainstream of even the light spiritual world decrees. And anyone who breaks out of that, even, right? I see that I get into these debates with them too. It's not my fault that I channel. It's not my fault. I mean, in essence, I feel like I was always designed, and you're always designed by the creator to be whatever frequency or resonance you are. So whatever life path you took that brought you to all these different experiences is your makeup of what your life experience is. So I can't challenge myself only if I were to speak to what I've seen or what I've had to interact with. And then it's like, you'll even have those in the spiritual community that will try to say, oh no, these persons are this color, this species, speaking this light language. And they'll even debate you on that. So it doesn't matter where you go. You're always going to find the average Joes in every realm of existence. So please know that I'm not just saying that average Joes are laymen or something to that effect. I'm saying the average Joes, or the average bears, are ones that are so still conceptually stuck in their own way. Because even if you, let's say, like, I've always called them fake light, because, and I go to so many different get-togethers where I see this all the time. It's like, that's what I mean. Like, I'm against the grain, and there's some of us that are against the grain, but rightfully so. We have to encompass both sides, or we wouldn't be a well-rounded individual. And what I find is that even in these conferences, or in these get-togethers, or these trade shows, or these like, I'm hosting actually like a solstice party come the 20th. And even when I, go to these events, that even the ones I put together myself, it's like I even have those within that spiritual community that kind of shite on things that I believe in, and what's funny is that where's the acceptance? Where's the love? Where's the light in that, and where's the compassion? So these simplistic ways of being that most of us tigers and, and lions always possess even fall short on the average bears, even in that community, because it's like fundamentally, or even when it comes to those that swear up and down they love Jesus and swear up and down they love the Bible. But then it's like, hey, do you think I could close the Bible and close my eyes and recite everything? No, and I wouldn't even pretend to be that. Have I read the Bible? Yes. Have I read the Ethiopian? Yes. Have I read the Gnostic text? Yes. The Nag Hammadi text? Yes. I've read them 2 or 3 times. Doesn't make me a professional. But what I'm saying is that you'll even go into that community and it's like you missay something, but the element or the actual action representational of the verse or representational of the passage is possessed by your way of being. Like you actually have compassion and they're like, oh, well, you're incorrect because you said they and not thy. And it's like, really? We're squabbling over words here? It's like, okay, and that's why there's a difference in your love and my love for the Lord, or your love and my love for God. Or it's like all these definables. It's like, okay, well, they're bear. you do you, boo, and I'll love you from over here. And the missing of the mark is what I think a lot of us need to really come to terms with, because it's like my level of compassion that I notice with even my own tribe, that seems to be the compassion. It's we're even hated on for compassion, if you can believe it. And that's totally okay, because again, it's not the norm. So we have to do, or we are embodying all these like eccentric ways of being that people don't seem to understand. It's like, I can love you for your opinion always, because we could go play chess, or we could go to a party and dance together, or like if we were to take this particular topic out of the mix, like we would still find a common ground. And the common ground is what I think a lot of us on this journey struggle with. So if you are someone that has had a hard time acclimating, or you're someone who's coming out of the bear costume and you're moving into your tiger stripes or your lion's mane, hit me up. But I just want to say, I hope that eventually we'll just love every single individual style of being within under the sun and plethora that they're in the jungle, because animals seem to kick it well together and they're different species, and I hope one day we all will too. Bye for now.